So it's wonderful to see everybody today. For how many of you is this one of your first times to campus? Oh, wonderful. Welcome. It's so great to have you here. Don't be afraid to go over to the other side of campus. There's a big engineering school over there and a school of sustainability and all kinds of really worthwhile things if you want to go check it out. And it's really wonderful to have you here on campus as part of this program. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you just ate lunch, right? All right, I know it's super easy to end up getting a little bit tired right after lunch. So I'd like you all to do a little exercise with me. Can you stand up and just stand up and stretch a little bit right after lunch? Let's do some clapping, Keep going. Okay. So I bet my wife this morning that I could get a standing ovation. Yeah. So I bet her this morning that I could get a standing ovation, and she was like, "No way are you gonna get a standing ovation speaking today." She's like, "You're just not the kind of person that can do that." And I'm like, "Wow, darling, you are such a supportive and wonderful spouse. Thank you so much." So I can't thank you enough for the conversation tonight at my dinner table. It's going to be amazing. All right, yes, thank you so much for doing that. All right, so this afternoon we're going to talk about the intersection of a couple different topics. Right? We're going to talk absolutely about sustainability, but we're not going to talk about it real loud. Right? Because in many business circles, sustainability is seen as something that's going to increase cost, cause us to have lost focus, and all kinds of other things. Of course, in some businesses, it's an incredibly important part of your mission and your drivers. And in some businesses, it's not. And that's okay. We'll talk about how you can actually use it as a driver of company performance. And also use it as a driver of company innovation. And if there's one thing that I know that all chief executives care about, it's innovation and how we continue to innovate going forward for our customers and for our organization. So we'll hit on a bunch of those topics. I wanted to start with a little bit about me, right? Let's see here. So yeah, I do have my doctoral degree in civil and environmental engineering with a minor in material science. I created, as part of that, this product up here in the upper corner, kind of a bendable concrete material. When I came out of my PhD, I was super excited to turn that into a company. Just like every PhD student that wants to take their amazing research and turn it into a company. And then I found out that no one cared. Like, oh. So then I continued on and did my postdoctoral research looking at quantitative sustainability analysis and how it can be used to guide design and to really focus the efforts in engineering and now business on very quantifiable outcomes related to sustainability. At that time, I did pick up an MBA in strategy and finance. I love the intersection between accounting, finance, and sustainability, and I know lots of people find that to be incredibly boring. It's not. It's like really cool. So then I applied for a faculty job out here. Things worked out, but I took a year in between that, and I moved to Wuhan, China. Now, the first question everybody asks me is, what were you doing in Wuhan, China? This was long before the pandemic. I was doing nothing. We were just hanging out at the wet market, doing some stuff with bats, whatever. No, I almost literally tripped upon a really cool application of what I had done for my doctoral work. So we got this bendable concrete, and I thought it was going to get used for all kinds of cool stuff. Seismic buildings, earthquake resistance, all this other really neat stuff. Yeah, like I said, nobody cared about that. And then I tripped upon a problem of individuals in developing countries stealing manhole covers. So the manhole cover is the big, heavy steel circular thing in the middle of the street, right? And in some places around the world, they're incredibly valuable. And so people at night steal them. You're not supposed to. And of course, in the morning, if you're driving along and the manhole cover isn't there, that's a problem. And so in order to fix this problem, there were a number of solutions out there. But I said, well, why don't we just replace it with something that doesn't have any value? Like concrete. It's just a rock, but special concrete that would allow it to continue to perform in really safe and durable ways. And that's how I tripped upon a business that we built in Wuhan, China, then expanded to a couple other continents and ultimately sold. I joined the faculty here. I teach classes on smart and sustainable design, construction, and operations of the built environment. I run a couple of centers. I do run the Center for Sustainable Development and Global Competitiveness. Our center's been doing research for about 20 years on the application of advanced computing to business operations and in developing countries to allow them to be more economically competitive globally, while also making sure that they don't take advantage of local populations and environments around them. Advanced computing, when I started, we used to call that expert systems. And then it became, reinforcement learning, and then machine learning, and now AI. It's all statistics, and so we have worked on that evolution, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. I do run our Smart and Sustainable Cities research campus over in Songdo, which is just outside of Seoul, in order to research more deeply how new technologies can lead towards smart and sustainable ecosystems. More recently, I took on the leadership role at the Stanford Technology Ventures Program, which is the entrepreneurship center over in the School of Engineering. And then, yes, I teach a bunch of courses here as well. If you're really interested, my multi-physics modeling and damage mechanic course is next quarter. Totally sign up, it's really good. So as an outline for this talk, we're supposed to, we take a lot of classes here at Stanford faculty where they try to make us good professors, like to actually teach well. They try. But they tell us that three things are what you want to always deliver. Okay, so here's my three things. The first, a little about me and a little about sustainability. The second is we'll talk about sustainability and organizational performance and how those two things fit together. And the third, I want to talk about sustainability and innovation and how those fit together as well. Now, don't worry. Yes, I'm a real engineering professor. We have no differential equations. There's not going to be any of that stuff in anything I'm going to talk about. We're going to keep it pretty high level. That being said, if you're interested in any of this in more detail, we can go as deep as you want. So the first question that we have to confront is, what does sustainability even mean? This is actually a real problem for organizations that want to engage in sustainability. When you think, and we'll talk more about it, when you think about what your customers value, it's easy to identify. Do they care about low price? Do they care about high quality? Do they care about good service? These are things that we can target and measure and manage to deliver really clear value propositions. One of the troublesome components of sustainability is it looks like this. These are just a few of the various green labels and stuff that you can put on different products. And so if you bring together 100 different customers, they'll probably have 110 viewpoints on what sustainability really means. For some of them, it's going to be about climate change. For some of them, it's going to be about indigenous populations. For some, it's going to be about water consumption, materials reuse, recycling. Could be about, PFAS chemicals in groundwater. Could be about a variety of other things. And the trouble with delivering a range of value propositions to a range of customer segments is it's really expensive and rarely works. And so one of the biggest problems that we have with sustainability is that we truly have no really clear definition that every one of your customers is going to agree, oh yeah, that's what I meant by sustainability. Deliver that as part of your value proposition and I'll buy your product. And that's hard for us. There's also a bunch of other stuff going on. At the bottom, I've got the Sustainable Development Goals. Is that what people mean? I don't know. When we talk to customers, rarely do we hear them say, oh, I think of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Oh, okay. And then there's that little ESG thing. Is that what people mean? Well, maybe. I always get this one. And whenever I teach sustainability and I ask, what does sustainability mean? Somebody in the audience will always raise their hand and recite to me the Brundtland definition of sustainability. I'm like, oh, that's great. And look, when Gro Brundtland was running the commission in 1987, this was and still is the gold standard definition. Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's great. The challenge is, it's really hard to run a business with that in mind. Like, if we shift some of these expenses over to next year's cash flows, is that going to compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs? I mean, there's a lot of business decisions that we make that this becomes very difficult to implement. It's not that we don't have intent to do it or that we want to do it. It's just hard to think of this as a guiding business principle. And so when we were first developing a lot of the quantitative measures of sustainability, we had to take a step back from that definition. And so the definitions and the metrics that we use, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the theory, actually start with us, human populations. And as human populations, we have human needs. And we normally sort of think of that in Maslowian hierarchy theory, right? The basic needs on up the pyramid. And in order to satisfy most of those very basic needs, we engage in a very complex set of production and consumption activities, which we refer to as the economy. And those activities require material and energy flows. We're extracting tremendous amounts of material and energy and resources from the earth around us. And as we do that, we necessarily force changes in ecosystem states. That could be polluted water streams, that could be depleted groundwater, that could be climate change. But the things that we do absolutely force changes in our ecosystems, sometimes drastic changes. And in some cases, those will feed back and loop to change our production and consumption activities. Yeah, we have to pay for a bunch of environmental cleanup of things we polluted. Or we have to turn up that air conditioner a little bit more because it's hotter a few times a year. And so the way we originally thought about the quantitative metrics of sustainability was to measure how well is this overall system of systems working. How well are we meeting human needs? We call those social indicators. Is there equity among all humans meeting their needs? The production and consumption activities, how are those doing? Well, we call those economic indicators, whether you call them GDP, output, GNP, whatever. And those other two, material flows and changes in the ecosystem states, we call those ecological indicators. This is where that triple bottom line of sustainability comes from. We didn't just all one day say, oh yeah, right, remember at Stanford we're supposed to teach in threes, let's make 3 bottom lines. This is sort of where they're rooted in us as human populations, in our Maslowian needs, and then how we satisfy them. And are we satisfying them in ways that do not compromise future generations? Okay, so yes, this is called the triple bottom line. Sometimes it's called the C framework, SEE, that's pretty easy, right? Sometimes it's called the 3 Ps, planet, profit, people. Sometimes it's called the 3 Es, environment, economy, and everyone. Whatever you want to call it, there's 3 of them. And this has been the foundation for a lot of our quantitative work over the past 20 to 30 years on how we can incorporate real measurement into the practice of sustainable business. Because as we all know, once you can measure it, you can manage it. You can also take those indicators back to customers and say, look, is this what you mean by sustainability? I can measure this and I can deliver this to you at cost and at high quality. And it allows you to engage in a really, really effective conversation with your customers about what they mean and what you can deliver. Now, you might be sitting there and thinking, sustainability, come on, it's not my job. Or I don't need to know that much about it. And this is one thing I like to say to a lot of our students who are going into this space. You may not be responsible for it, but you're responsible for the success of the outcome. As a senior leader, you aren't responsible for doing a lot of stuff. You have great teams, you have great employees, you have a great organization. So you're not responsible for doing it, but you are responsible for the success of the outcome of it, because that's what your shareholders will always look towards. And so when it comes to sustainability, I'm not saying that you have to be the guru at your firm to do all this stuff. But knowing where it comes from, knowing why we're doing the things we're doing, and knowing what some of the opportunities are associated with sustainability can be really important. So you're not responsible for it, but no matter what, you're responsible for the success of the outcome. All right, so I wanted to kind of set the stage on where I'm coming from as it relates to sustainability-focused business practices, and also how we think about offering sustainability as a value proposition to our customers. 1 down, 2 to go. All the organizers are checking their watch. They're like, oh my gosh, is it going to be done on time? All right, so sustainability and performance. I want to pick up off of a line that I just said around value. You probably never thought this slide was going to come up in a sustainability talk. Right? Like what? So okay, right? Let's talk a little bit about pricing models. Right? At the bottom, you got the cost of goods sold. That's pretty much your pricing floor. Right? I mean, yeah, you can do some other stuff to give discounts and whatnot, but if you do it for too long, it's not called a business, it's called a hobby. Right? And then up at the top, we have objective value that the customer actually gets, and just as importantly, the perceived value that the customer perceives that they get. And those two are not the same. Right? There's a lot of times where the objective value is simply not perceived by the customer for whatever reason. And in some cases, the perception is actually above the objective value, but that's pretty rare. So yes, your cost of goods sold is kind of the floor on pricing, and the perceived value is kind of the ceiling on pricing for most rational customers. We don't like to pay more for stuff than we perceive it to be worth. We see that as a bad deal, right? And so your price has got to be somewhere in the middle there. So if we're going to talk about sustainability and business performance, let's talk about this, right? Because the gaps between price and cost of goods sold, that's kind of your gross margin. And the gap between price and perceived value is consumer surplus. The value that the customer felt they left with that they didn't pay for. And look, we always like to get a good deal, right? I want to feel like I got more than I paid for. And so by trying to separate the floor and the ceiling, this is going to be our mechanism for really thinking about sustainability as a way to drive business outcomes. Because I can guarantee you one of the most important business outcomes you have is profitability. And sustainability absolutely comes in line with that. So we're going to talk about ways to very functionally reduce the cost of goods sold associated with, by using sustainability as a driver for reducing cost of goods sold. We'll also talk about how we can think about increasing perceived value of customers. And anytime we can push those two things apart, you're going to do better in business. So let's start with the cost of goods sold. Now, the mechanisms that I'm going to go over here, there's a lot more behind every single one of these, and I'm only going to sort of hit the top line. The top line of what these mechanisms are and how we can implement them. Right? So it's going to be a bit of a laundry list with a couple of examples here and there. Okay. So the first I want to talk about is value in compliance. Whether it's an expanded protection of the license to operate, increased flexibility with regulators, or avoidance of penalties. Right? The first is expanded protection of the license to operate. Every one of us conducts business with either an explicit or implicit license to operate. Your explicit one is offered usually by a governmental or regulatory authority. The implicit license to operate is the license to operate provided by your neighbors, by the local community that you're in. They allow you to be there as their neighbor and doing business. And there are all kinds of instances. I come from West Michigan, where Nestle has a real big plant pumping a lot of groundwater. Legally, they can do it. The community doesn't like it. It's created a lot of costs associated with their efforts. You know, a lot of folks will say, look, penalties are just part of the cost of doing business. Okay. Part of the cost of doing business poorly. And so these types of costs are real, right? In addition, all of the lawyers that we pay in order to deal with all those problems. Those are real costs. And what we find when we look at firms that engage in more sustainability-focused efforts is we see those costs come down. Increased flexibility with regulators, that's time to market. And time truly is money. How quickly can you get regulators to approve things? And when they see you as a willing and engaging and proactive partner, they're quicker to come to an agreement with you on what that looks like. In my field, green buildings, having a LEED rated building is pretty much required now to get a building permit in a lot of municipalities. Oh, okay, that's increased flexibility with regulators. Value and operational efficiency. Resource use, minimization of waste, reduced cost of management, reduced maintenance costs. Interestingly enough, that's what we've always called the Toyota production system. Oh, it's like, oh no. If you look back and think about the 7 wastes, like, oh my gosh, he's talking about TPS. If you think about the 7 wastes that come out of TPS, the Toyota production system, and lean manufacturing, these are all things that you manufacture that no one wants to pay for, or even worse, you have to pay to get rid of. That was never good business. And so thinking about efficiency of resource use, less material, less waste, less emissions, which is simply a non-value added product that no one wants to buy from you. Getting rid of those is still really good sustainability-focused business. You just don't have to call it that. You can also call it process optimization. Thinking about reduced cost of hazard management, you have to pay a lot less to maintain hazardous waste facilities if you don't have hazardous wastes. And yes, there are different levels of substitutability when it comes to some of these technologies, but very often there are opportunities. We'll talk about enhanced innovation in a second. Increased productivity and morale. A couple of years ago, I was at a very large fossil fuel company talking about a lot of these things, and one of their very senior engineers came up to me and said, "Wow, this was the best day at work I've had in years." I was like, "Wow, your job sucks." Like, if I am the best day of your job in years, like, really? He's like, "Look, I work at a fossil fuel company." He's like, "It's hard for me to think about how I fit into the sustainability piece. But then when I hear about process optimization, when I hear about doing more with less, that's all that I do all day long. I just never viewed it that way." I said, "Wow, that's wonderful." Right? We also know that young people more and more want to work at firms that have a mission and a vision that's related to sustainability. And we all know how expensive employee churn is. That is a real cost. So the longer you can keep those great people incentivized and excited to come to work and do their best, your costs come down. This is the one that people think is probably the easiest to see in many regards. Like, look, you can reduce risk and the costs of risk. The trouble with this one is, in a lot of cases, these are costs that are kind of opportunity cost related, right? And that stuff that's very difficult to realize. Aside from this last one, right? Reduced insurance premiums. That's one that we're paying a lot more attention to these days. And the more that you can do to take advantage of that, the better off you're going to be. The wonderful part about it is so many of our insurance models are now no longer solely actuarially based, but now based on quantitative data of what kinds of activities you're doing at your firm to set that policy. So that means every single thing that you do can now be put into some kind of risk profile reduction or increase as part of your insurance premium. Reduced product liability costs. How long have we been waiting for a full settlement on asbestos here in the United States? And the costs associated with product liability, they're massive. This is one that my finance and accounting friends tend to like. Reduced uncertainty of corporate transactions. Corporate transactions, whether it's a debt offering, an equity offering, an M&A, they are really expensive. There's nothing that you want more than once you engage in that and start to move along that line that is actually successful. One of those big things that every single one of those due diligence teams is looking for is like, what were you pouring out of the back door in the 1970s? What are you doing now? Right? Those are the kinds of things that, if you're doing them poorly, lead to due diligence nightmares. But if you're doing them well, lead to a quick and seamless due diligence process. Now, I did not say that I made M&A easy. M&A is not easy, but it can be less expensive, as can debt offerings and equity offerings. Reduced permitting times, yeah, it kind of goes back to increased flexibility with regulators, and improved equipment acquisition and procurement by having some sustainability principles embedded into your equipment and equipment acquisition and procurement guidelines that tends to lead to decades of lower fuel efficiency or better fuel efficiency, less maintenance, and a culture of we buy things to last over long periods of time, and that brings us more value. So those were some of the concepts that we've seen, and I have lots of details on every single one of them that we've seen to help you drive down cost of goods sold. So now let's talk about the other piece. Okay, let's try to offer more value. So for those that are in B2B, look, B2B is part of a value chain. Everything that you did on sustainability in your business can be sold as part of a better sustainability value chain to your customers. Because when it comes to offering sustainability-focused products in a supply chain and in a value chain, everyone is part of that effort. And so offering up all of those benefits to your customers is a wonderful way to get them to perceive higher value. Yeah, you know what? We got all of our toxic chemicals out of our product to help reduce our product liability. When you buy our product, your product liability will also be a reduced risk. So many of the things that you engage in can be sold to your customers later down the value chain. So all those things that you did in compliance, all those things you did in operations efficiency, risk management, and capital investment, those yield dividends in a B2B relationship. Sometimes you can engage in enhanced product attributes, additional labels. I mean, you saw that cacophony of labels I put up here. Okay, maybe some customers react well to that. How do you think about going for some of those? And that is really a market growth opportunity. It could also be improved corporate brand and image. And then finally, what we've seen in nearly every case that businesses start to engage in this is higher quality business relationships. You look at vendors to you a different way because you're looking at them in a much more holistic way. And once you've established that relationship with a really great vendor who can meet your needs, you tend to hold on to them. And I'm going to go back to Toyota, and one of the things that they had said early on was work with your supply chain partners to make them better as well. This is a great opportunity to do that in order to grow market share. And then finally, strategic direction by helping to enhance your product mix, to help monitor and manage your organizational strategy with a much more clearly defined mission and set of goals and values, potentially redefining and expanding markets, and in the end, potentially even resulting in a much more meaningful mission for the business. Maybe you can make this your greatest day at work, just like that fellow at the fossil fuel company. So as we think about how sustainability fits within organizational objectives and performance, I want you to think about the very simple pricing model of where's the floor, where's the ceiling, and how do you push those two apart? And there's a lot that we can do that we call sustainability, but which is also just good business to help you derive more value from those, to appropriate more value from your customers and deliver them more value at the point of sale. Two down, one to go. So now let's talk about innovation. Oh, there was one thing I forgot to mention. As we think about a lot of those business processes that we're trying to optimize, we're thinking about really, really complex systems that build off of one another and are highly integrated and related. It's a great application for AI. I was told to mention AI. It actually is a really good application for AI. As I mentioned, our research center has spent years looking at advanced computing to try to improve the efficiency and performance of businesses and business processes. It's a tremendous opportunity for artificial intelligence, and specifically large language models, because they can process information in that sphere that we have never been able to process to date. And we are doing a lot of work today on a lot of those ideas. Now, of course, on the flip side, you've got a lot of energy that goes into running those models. And so we're also doing a lot of research on what that's going to look like moving forward. The real question, and we do not know the answer yet, are the exponential gains associated with artificial intelligence and its application to economic problems, will they outstrip the exponential requirements associated with the energy to run those systems? We just simply don't know that yet until we get to a lot of the applications where they seem to be really, really beneficial. Okay, so now innovation, sustainability and innovation, and how do these two things fit together? How can you use sustainability as a driver of innovation? I want to start with product market fit. One of the most important things that every business needs. Every startup is simply an experiment in trying to find it, and every business is a mad scramble, and every large organization is an organization scrambling to keep it. And when you're on it, it's great. And when you lose it, it's hard. So many folks think product market fit is simply the intersection of the market and the product. We don't think that's quite right. Because I can come up with all kinds of really cool products that the market might think are great. But if I can't actually make them, it doesn't really matter. It's called imagination. And so therefore, when it comes to product market fit, we think that the real intersection here is yes in what the market needs and wants, yes in the potential products that will meet that need, but also in your ability to actually make that thing at a reasonable cost and at a scale that can support your enterprise. And so it's this intersection of all three of them that really leads to this core product market fit that every firm is looking with its customer segment. The darned thing about markets is they move. Right? Customers are kind of fickle, right? They move around, they got different needs. Okay, so the market moves. Market moves, that Venn diagram no longer works. So what do you need to do? You got to figure out how to move with it. You got to figure out how to move your product line and how to change your executional capabilities in order to move with the market. And those second two arrows, that's called innovation. We engage in innovation to either stay on product market fit or anticipate a move to keep product market fit. And so those innovations can be either new products that you're coming up with to sell, or new executional capabilities to sell to new markets, to come up with other things, whatever it might be. Okay, well, if that's the way we can view innovation, then if the market is moving to sustainability labels or ESG or anything else sustainability related, then that means that you are more than likely going to have to move those other two circles to respond to it. You're going to have to come up with new products or at least new product attributes that will allow you to keep right on that Venn diagram. You're going to have to figure out new people to hire, new organizational capabilities that you have to bring on to be able to deliver on that product market fit. And so that's the core. That's the theory around how you use sustainability as a driver of innovation. It's moving the market. Therefore, we have to move our organization and the things that we offer to that market. Because if we don't, we're going to lose that, and we're going to be like every other dinosaur that didn't figure out how to move with the market to keep that product market fit. We have to innovate. By the way, you can use this framework far outside of sustainability, right? Okay, so how do you actually go about doing that? Well, what we found to be successful are three different ways that you can think about really changing your executional capabilities and your product offering as they relate to sustainability. The first way is fortifying the core, meaning take your core product offering and add a value proposition associated with sustainability to that core value proposition. The second is innovate into adjacencies, offering products that are adjacent to your core product, but which have a sustainability profile. You can use that to help drive market growth or to offer simply more value to existing customers. The key here is making sure you're developing synergistic opportunities to increase overall profitability. And then third, just totally go into a whole new business. We're not known for sustainability. We're never going to be known for sustainability, but let's move into an entirely new area so that we can start to take advantage of some of these ideas. You know, if we think about fortifying the core can be pursuing or adding an additional product certification or a label to your product if you don't already have one. Or if you think about something like Google trying to hit a renewable energy target, it hasn't changed their core offering at all. But what it has done is try to make their core offering more sustainable. And to be honest, you and I have no idea if it's being powered by renewable energy or not. So using product-oriented, process-oriented, or distribution-oriented strategies to improve the profile of current products and expand their appeal. That's that whole lifting up the perceived value. Innovating into adjacency, adding new sustainability-focused features to existing products. How many of you paid for a carbon offset to an airline to get here? Wow, good sustainability crowd. You can, right? And where does that money go? It goes to support sustainability-focused efforts that, in this case, that airline is doing. Okay, that's an adjacency. Look, Lufthansa is not in the business of offering climate offsets, right? But it's another type of value stream. Microsoft has a new product on cloud carbon tracking to help you get to net zero for your business. Okay, it's another service product offering that's adjacent to what they normally do to help you along. Create a completely new business unit. Most folks wouldn't say ExxonMobil, big on sustainability. But one of their recent acquisitions, a polymer materials company that makes wind turbine blades, that looks to lightweight cars, that's moving into the market of hydrogen tanks for all kinds of vehicles. Those are totally sustainability plays. How did they do it? They just did it through an M&A. Okay. And innovating via acquisition is totally a legit thing. Right? And that's how they felt they wanted to do it. Now look, I know this is not easy. It's not easy to change culture. It's not easy to change an organization. We've got lots of frameworks to help people do that here. Right? The one that we like in my discipline is called the pop culture framework, where you have to think about what the product is, the organization that's going to offer it, and the processes, the workflows you're going to use to offer it. I'm not going to go into detail here. We've got tons and tons of great thinking about how to do this well, because it's a tremendous opportunity. All right, conclusions. See, I am so good on time, right? If you look at your watch, I'm like, right on. Okay, so 3, right? Sustainability is a shift in market demand and need. Take advantage of it to drive innovation, or else you might lose product market fit. And there's nothing that senior executives fear more than losing product market fit. All right, if we're going to lose it, we better be on it, right? And of course, you can always, Eastman Kodak, right? Like, Sustainability efforts align well, if not perfectly, with reducing cost of goods sold, increasing perceived value of our products, and creating opportunities for both value appropriation and capture. And you can do that both by reducing the cost of goods sold and increasing the value to the customer. For those that are struggling with this, you don't need to use the S word. I talked about efficiency. I talked about customer value. I talked about innovation. Those are things that successful, great businesses have always done and never used the word sustainability. Thank you.